Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Hessen, and this is TV7's daily update. And in today's edition, we'll focus both on the Gaza Strip as well on the Lebanese file. Apparently, the United States is currently applying additional pressure on the Beirut government to start a diplomatic process with Israel on resolving the various disputes that the two countries have had now for many years. Where is this heading, and what are the consequences thereof? Beyond that, of course, the Houthis are now still holding roughly 47 UN employees, staff workers that have been working for the United Nations. They happen to be local Yemenis, but nonetheless, this Iranian proxy is now blaming them for being responsible in sharing with Israel information on the location of the Houthi leadership, which has been decapitated to a large extent during the course of the past several months. And we also will touch briefly on the Iranian portfolio, since the Islamic Republic continues to try and rehabilitate itself following the 12-day war. According to IAEA Director Rafael Grossi, they have not restarted their enrichment program. Nevertheless, they do still have enough enriched uranium in order to have an accumulated number of nuclear warheads. Were they indeed moving ahead in doing so, of course, much of the equipment that they require to do so has been destroyed in the process, but nonetheless, the intelligence communities have a lot of work in front of them. And before we deliberate all that and more, let's introduce our experts for today, to include our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Next to him, Brigadier General in Reserve Doron Gavish, commander of the Israeli Air Force Task Force for Air and Missile Defense. And last but certainly not least, and it's good to see you, Colonel, is Colonel Reuven Ben Shalom, cross-cultural strategist, as well as a frequent contributor, as well as a host here at TV7 from time to time. And I'd like to actually start with you, Colonel Ben Shalom. Let's start today once more with the Gaza Strip. The CMCC, the Civil Military Center that is tasked with bringing about the enforcement as well as the implementation of President Trump's 21-point plan. Where is that standing right now? There are circulating reports about some progress being made in the formulation of a task force that would bring about potentially a force on the ground.
Well, first we have to understand that this kind of mechanism is not new to the kind of cooperation that we have. If you look at the Israeli discourse in recent days that I think is very politicized, one might think that this is something brand new and that even has ramifications to Israel's sovereignty. In Israel, that would depend where you stand politically. But of course, the concern from those who are expressing genuine concern is, what are the Americans doing here in Israel telling us what to do? Aren't we sovereign? Can't we decide our own fate? But of course, this is strange, if not ridiculous, if you ask me, because we always did it this way. That means every time there was something on the agenda, something that was on the after part of an operation or a war, when there were things that need to be dealt with, mechanisms that need to be done, we did it together with the Americans. There are many instances. One of them that I was involved in was in the Second Lebanon War, where vital U.S. interests were coordinated through a combined element. We have protocols in place. We practice for these things for many years. Certainly the task itself can change, but the standard operating procedures is something that it's plug and play and we know how to do it. The nature of our cooperation, by the way, was never that the Americans tell us what to do. Israeli ego would never allow that. And still knowing our place, and Doron could probably attest better than me, it's more a shoulder-to-shoulder, side-by-side kind of mechanism with respect. Still, the United States has global reach, global responsibility, superpower. Israel, a small country in the Middle East. And the last thing I'll say is, we always wanted international involvement. We always said to the world, Iran isn't our problem. Their proxies aren't our problem. Don't make it only our problem. Come, join, be with us, influence, mainly the United States. So when it happens, we have to be happy and not the opposite. So since we don't know what's going to be moving forward, what's going to be the nature of the force, who yes, who knows, But working together with the Americans, we know very well. Right now, we have a good alignment of terminology and building the mechanism, and I hope it will be fruitful in the future.
Thank you, Colonel Ben Shalom. Mr. Oren, two hostages have been returned last night to Israel. Thankfully, two, of course, out of 13, 11 still remain in Hamas captivity. But nonetheless, following the identification, we're talking about Sahel Baruch, 25-year-old, and Amiram Cooper, who is a 85-year-old who was murdered on the 7th of October. Sahel was unfortunately, after captured, murdered 2 months into his captivity. What can you tell us about that? And of course, at a time when we still don't know when their funerals are to be held.
So there is a de facto partition of the Gaza Strip following the ceasefire agreement, which is, of course, the very first point in President Trump's plan. And while eventually Hamas expects the IDF to withdraw from most of the Gaza Strip, except for a perimeter around the Israeli border and the Egyptian border. Nevertheless, right now on the ground, the IDF controls more than 50% of the Gaza Strip. The problem is that Hamas claims that several of the 11 remaining bodies or remains are probably in the area held by the IDF, either in tunnels which may have collapsed during the Israeli maneuver, or in semi-destroyed buildings. And therefore, the Hamas people and some of the other smaller factions, they have to go there either with the Red Cross or not, but without the IDF, to look for them and exhume the bodies and prepare them for return. Now, whether this is truthful or not remains to be seen. Obviously, Hamas is using the respite it is getting through this fire to rehabilitate. But for the time being, Israel, and perhaps more importantly, President Trump, give Hamas the benefit of the doubt when there are attacks by Hamas snipers or other squads. Israel responds in force, very lethal force. The lesson is immediately being learned, and quiet returns to the strip mostly. And one side effect is that the Houthis in Yemen have made good on their claim that they are only supporting the Palestinians, and once there is a ceasefire, they will no longer launch missiles at Israel, and even will let merchant marine with goods to and from Israel pass through the Bab el Mandeb. It has not been tested yet.
Indeed. Well, with regard to Hamas, to say that it's a lying organization that is very comfortable in lying about pretty much everything is an understatement. We do see that time and again, and they have a proven record of pursuing deception with regard to everything that they stand for. And of course, this is something that they're quite comfortable, particularly at a time when they see Israeli commitment and utmost pressure from the United States to bring about the success of the 21-point plan. I will point out that the Qatari Prime Minister's confession or acknowledgement that Hamas did violate the ceasefire, and claiming also further that the narrative of Hamas is unverifiable, something that is seldomly heard, if at all, by the Qataris, does indicate that the United States is applying significant pressure on the Qataris, since they most undoubtedly did not make such a statement willingly, but nonetheless, that is something to also take into account at a time when those type of countries say one thing in the front of the camera and another thing in the back of the camera. It is quite refreshing to see the change, of course, when they're doing so in front of the cameras. All the while in Turkey, the military or defense ministry spokesman and others have blamed Israel for violating the ceasefire in this exchange, in contrast to the Qataris. So that is also an interesting point to be made. Now, General Gavish, I'd like to follow up on the point that Mr. Owen made about the Houthis. Naturally, the Houthis were very keen, which is also an understatement, with regard to ending the cycle of hostilities with Israel being battered time and again. The conditions on the ground there are becoming worse. But with that being said, I am also hearing reports of the Houthis preparing for a new round of hostilities. What is being done in order to confront that notion?
Well, Jonathan, allow me one sentence to the discussion that was today. Or just the previous discussion that you had. I would summarize it in one sentence. The Hamas is a terrorist organization. They behave like a terrorist organization. They didn't change their skins. This is who they are, and this is how we should treat them in all aspects. So this is with regard to the Hamas. Going back to your question, in a way we could say it in some extent. We could say it also with regards to the Houthis, although the Houthis are something in between, I would say, Hamas and Hezbollah. They have their own region. They are controlling it. So it's not exactly the same, but it's a terrorist organization which have a military power, and they are regaining their power. They are taking their time. They are taking this pause in order to regain their power. And not only them, by the way, we might go and talk about the Iranians, but the Iranians are doing the same. We have to remember that those forces around us, once again, they didn't change their ideas. It's not that they like us more than they liked us before. The situation that we are with Houthis is kind of a ceasefire. There is no agreement or something like this. So someone who is enforcing them, they are doing basically what they believe it is for their interest, and we are doing what we believe it is in our interest. So also on this thing, the bottom line, we have to remember that the Houthis, we shouldn't look at it only as an Israeli issue. It's a regional issue. It's an international issue. And I think that also the answer should be something like this. The last thing is, of course, that Israel is prepared on the defense and on the offense. And as much as they are preparing themselves, of course, we are also preparing ourselves if things would be changed in this front.
Indeed. Thank you, General Gavish. I will mention that not only the Houthis, but we are seeing more and more chatter coming out of Sudan, where the government forces, particularly of Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, which are backed by both the Muslim Brotherhood and particularly here Turkey, as well as the Islamic Republic of Iran, with a whole host of drones and other technologies, are repeatedly stating that they are preparing themselves to launch attacks similar to the Houthis towards Israel. So that is something that we also need to take into account in the long run. There are more countries that are seeing themselves as obliged towards this delusional concept that the Iranians are pursuing. But nonetheless, the eyes remain open to all theaters and all enemies, and Israel and its allies and partners, to include the United States, are clear-eyed about those challenges and threats. Now, Colonel Ben-Shalom, let's divert our attention to Lebanon, where we do see the Trump administration ratcheting up pressure on the Beirut government, expecting to see dialogue to resolve issues. What can you tell us about that?
First, I'm not sure that this is the right timeline. The Americans have their own considerations, and I can imagine that this administration wants to have achievements, notches on their belt from this perspective. And it also could be that I'm wrong and they have a better strategic understanding of the Middle East. But my concern now is to see that the ceasefire is implemented and, in a way, have Israel back off and not being perceived as someone that intervenes with the Lebanese issue. My concern here is that any debate with Israel on the framework of peace or et cetera, or resolving border disputes, even though they're tiny and ridiculous, that this may change the discourse inside of Lebanon with Lebanese people saying, hey, you see, maybe we should continue to support Hezbollah that are waving the flag of resistance. So in my mind, I think maybe a better course would have been to separate these two issues and first work on Lebanon internal and implementing UN resolutions and saving the Lebanese people from the clutches of Iran, and then moving forward. I will say that peace with Israel is so easy because there's nothing really there. There is no real dispute. Shaba Farms is maybe a small invented issue, things we could resolve. And also to connect to the debate before, remember that the overall picture didn't change. Our situational awareness is critical. We can't fall into this trap of rhetoric of peace. And by the way, the word peace is used too much, including by the US administration. We didn't reach peace. We don't have peace with Hamas. We're hopeful for peace. We have ceasefires and mechanisms moving forward, but the ideology of Iran, the ideology of these players in the region didn't change. We have to, in a way, respect. They have deep convictions. They still dream of annihilating Israel. The Muslim Brotherhood sees Israel as a stain that needs to be wiped off the map. So hopeful, but still realistic and good situational awareness.
With that being said, the Trump administration has also conveyed that unless there is some sort of movement, both on the disarmament, but particularly also on the diplomatic front with Israel, there are going to be fiscal consequences to inaction. That is, the streams of funds emanating out of both the United States as well as the European Union and particularly the Gulf Arab states, which is the most substantive amounts of funds earmarked for the rehabilitation of Lebanon, will be withheld. Mr. Oren?
Yes, so one point regarding Sudan, which you mentioned, Sudan was supposed to be one of the four Muslim countries in the Abraham Accords. Apparently, this is the least successful part of this quartet. Now, Hezbollah, as well as Hamas, has a very stiff demand. You mentioned it by disarmament. And this is where the immediate and the important clash. The immediate task is indeed to prolong the ceasefire in Gaza and sustain the ceasefire in South Lebanon. And therefore, if you manage, Hezbollah, Hamas, if you manage to put off the other demand, the more substantial one, to disarm, you do it by various tactics, like giving up the dead hostages, not in the first 72 hours, but perhaps over the next 32 days, or who knows how long it will take. Now, the American envoy, Morgan Ortagus, just finished her visit to Lebanon. It was not successful because the pressure she put on President Aoun and Prime Minister Salam and Parliament Speaker Berry was met actually with silence. What can they say? They don't want to clash with Hezbollah. They don't want to renew the civil war. And therefore, they have a very simplistic formula. Yes, we will disarm, or we will make Hezbollah disarm, but we will do it gradually. We'll start in South Lebanon. We'll do it step by step. Maybe by the end of the year, the Lebanese armed forces will manage to clear the area, maybe not. And this is Lebanon. You can't really squeeze anything out of it. And the fines, the financial pressure, which you mentioned, will not do the trick.
Indeed, it will only draw Lebanon back to the arms of Hezbollah, which is a very rich cartel. Let's face it, and more so. And this is, of course, in my opinion, when we look specifically at Lebanon, we also need to take into account that uh, the government in Lebanon is still very corrupt, and it still has a lot of interests beyond the scope of what is being done right now by the United States and France, and some of its interests lie with the Iranians and with Hezbollah. And of course, the Treasury Department in the US, as well as others, have been trying to root this out, but it does not seem to be very successful. Uh, I'd like to be optimistic, not very much so at this moment in time. Now, General Kavish, you spoke earlier about Iran. They are preparing. They are making a push to rehabilitate their offensive capabilities as well as their surface-to-air capabilities. What can you tell us about that?
Exactly that, Jonathan. You are fully right. We see that they are trying to gain back their forces. From one hand, we could say that it makes sense. Everyone probably would do it. From the other hand, of course, we have to remember that when Israel looked toward Iran, we talked about the imminent threat from the nuclear capabilities that were just about to be mature. But then from the other side, Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he talked about the goals of the world, also the war, also mentioned the amount of ballistic missiles that they have, that in some point it could be destructive to Israel. So this is, I'm sure, something that Israel would closely follow, not only Israel, also United States and everyone. It is one thing if they are rebuilding their forces in order to be in a point that they're willing to defend themselves, or they are rebuilding their offensive capabilities, and then it goes back to the discussion that we have along the way during the last few months about Israel's strategy, about our looking at our enemies and behaving in a way that we would prevent something that we would understand that it's becoming essential, imminent threat or very dangerous threat to Israel, and then Israel would have to take his own measures and decide what to do with it. So we are, I think, following very carefully what is happening with Iran. This is from a military point of view, and still we hope that they would choose the right path. United States President Trump said more than once that he will be very happy if they would like to join the trend in the Middle East. So I don't know, of course, if they would become a part of Abraham Accord. I'm not sure. I fully agree with what was mentioned by Reuven, that when he said that, they still have their ideology. They didn't change their ideology. They are there. We have to respect it, and we have to be acknowledge of it, that this is the situation. So this is also something that we must take into consideration while we are deciding what are we doing toward Iran.
Now, Reuven, we don't have very much time left, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, Colonel, on the situation in Syria, where we're seeing the Turkish Defense Ministry announce that it's absorbing roughly 50 new cadets into its defense colleges in Turkey from Syria, which would then return to the Syrian army and lead that army into nobody really knows other than the skepticism that roams in the air. But nonetheless, it seems like they are being intertwined, deepening their grip over that country, namely Ankara over Damascus, while Damascus itself is also becoming more and more aggressive with regard to southern Syria in particular, and the Druze dominant, where we do also have over 40,000 Christian civilians in Sueda Governorate, which is under a really terrible siege by government forces as we speak.
Extremely complex situation. The last thing that you mentioned, Israel has a bond and responsibility with the Druze community. I just visited our Druze community in the north last week, and only when I got there I understood how deep these emotions are and the family ties. And I do think we have an obligation and responsibility, and I think we are doing. I don't know if enough, but I think we are doing. As far as Turkey, they have a dream, I think, to reestablish their rule over the area or their influence over the area. And with the collapse of the Assad regime, this was wonderful for them. They seized the responsibility. They're doing the right things to push into Syria and gain influence there. For Israel, this is extremely troubling because Turkey is voicing, at least their rhetoric is pushing the agenda of the Muslim Brotherhood, their support with Hamas, etc. We lost, or the Assad regime fell. For us was wonderful. Hezbollah doesn't have that playground, but it's reshaping now something on our back door that could be very challenging for Israel. That's one of the reasons why we're very active, and we still have our forward deployed forces within Syria, and I don't think we can take them out very soon.
Absolutely. Well, we still have a lot of various developments that have taken place over the course of the last 24 hours and various trends that are in the process of evolving, including in Judea and Samaria and Jordan and Egypt and 3 points, Iraq, among others. But we do not have time to cover everything today. So with that, I'd like to thank Mr. Oren, General Gavish, and Colonel Ben Shalom for all of your insights today. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well, and to wish you a Shabbat Shalom from here in Jerusalem. Until next time.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel, and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.